I sat across from my brother in a conference room in Rhinebeck, an escrow agent between us with three documents spread on the table. The buyer, my brother's college friend, had just gone pale. Desmond hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. My attorney was reading the fraudulent lien paperwork out loud. $47,000 he'd borrowed against property he didn't own. And I watched his face stay perfectly blank. A police report wasn't filed yet, but the word misrepresentation kept coming up, and the escrow agent was already explaining why the transaction couldn't proceed. That's when I realized something that hit harder than any legal argument ever could. This wasn't about the house. It never was. It was about erasing the proof that our father had chosen me over him. But none of this started that day. It started 3 weeks earlier with a midnight email I almost deleted. Before we dive in, I'd love if you could drop a comment. How are you feeling right now? Tell me in one word. I read every comment, and your perspective matters more than you know. Please note, some details in this story are fictionalized for narrative purposes. What matters most is the message it carries. Arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of late-night message that changes everything before you've even finished reading it. I'd been working late, laptop open on my kitchen table, rain tapping against the window of my Brooklyn apartment. The sender was Hudson Valley Escrow Services. Subject line: Action required. Signature confirmation for property transfer, 47 Orchard Lane, Rhinebeck, NY, my childhood home. I clicked it open. The email was professional, routine, requesting my signature to finalize a real estate transaction. Closing date, December 28, 2025. 21 days away. Seller, Desmond Frost. My brother. Purchase price, $320,000. I stopped breathing. Desmond was selling the house. Our father had died 6 weeks ago, and apparently my brother had wasted no time finding a buyer. The fact that he hadn't mentioned it was typical. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. Then I kept reading. Legal owner per county records, Thalia M. Frost. Not Desmond. Me. I didn't own that house. I'd never owned it. When Dad died, I'd assumed it would go to both of us, be sold and split. I'd been too busy arranging the funeral, clearing out his things, fielding calls from distant relatives. But according to county records, the house was in my name. Had been since September 2024, 3 months before Dad died. I stared at the screen, rain drumming steadily outside. At 34, I'd spent my career helping other people set boundaries with toxic families. Ironic, considering I'd never enforced a single one with my own. I worked for a nonprofit in downtown Brooklyn, supporting families escaping domestic instability. I knew all the patterns, every version of financial manipulation, every shade of control disguised as care. I taught workshops on documentation, on legal rights, on recognizing when guilt was being used as currency. And here I was, staring at proof my own brother was trying to sell a house he didn't own. I scrolled further. Buyer, Wayne Robert Sutton. The name hit like cold water. Desmond's college roommate. His best man 15 years ago. They'd lost touch, then reconnected a few years back. This wasn't a random sale through a realtor. This was a deal arranged between friends, negotiated privately, probably over beers and handshakes. The kind of transaction that skips uncomfortable questions. I read the email 3 times, each pass making it more real and less believable. Then I set the laptop down without closing it, screen still glowing in the dark kitchen. Rain continued against the window, steady and indifferent. I picked up my laptop and opened a new search tab. Not to call Desmond, not to panic, just to understand exactly where I stood. I typed, "How to stop a real estate transaction in New York." Because the first rule I'd learned helping others escape bad situations. Before you confront, you gather information. I spent what was left of the night reading New York real estate law. By dawn, I knew what questions to ask. But first, I needed to understand why. I found the box at the back of my closet just after 7, the one I'd brought home from Rhinebeck after the funeral and hadn't opened since. My father, Bernard Frost, had died at 67 6 weeks earlier, leaving behind a will that told one story and a handwritten note that told the truth. I dumped everything onto the kitchen table. The official will was there, standard language I'd half listened to while trying not to cry. But underneath was a small envelope, sealed, my name written on front in Dad's block letters. Just Thalia. Nothing else. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. 4 paragraphs in his handwriting, dated 3 months before he died. The first line stopped me cold. Desmond has a gambling problem. Online poker. Started in 2022. I sat down slowly. The note laid out facts in Dad's measured tone. Desmond has accumulated debt. Dad discovered it when a creditor called. My brother begged him not to tell anyone, promised it was under control. I paid it once, Dad wrote, $23,000. He promised he'd stopped. He didn't. The next paragraph explained the house. Dad had transferred the title to my name in September, 3 months before his death. He'd done it quietly while Desmond thought everything would be split evenly. I'm giving you the house because I know what will happen if I don't, he wrote. Desmond will sell it to pay debts or use it as collateral. You won't fight him because you never fight him. So I'm taking the choice away from both of you. For years, I'd counseled clients on recognizing when family used guilt as currency, and here was my own father, from beyond death, cutting that transaction off at the source. The final paragraph was shorter. You don't need to explain anything to him. You just need to keep it. The house is yours. I trust you more than I trust your brother. Don't let him convince you otherwise. His signature at the bottom, same as every birthday card, every check, every note on the kitchen counter. I heard footsteps behind me. Beckett Reed, a 36-year-old history teacher with the kind of calm that came from having survived his own family wars, stood in the doorway without speaking. He'd spent the night, hadn't asked questions when I'd stayed up late. He walked over, read the note over my shoulder. When he finished, he set it down gently, not filling the silence with advice I hadn't asked for. He knew, he said, not a question. I nodded. He knew from the beginning. I stood, reached for my phone. I'm calling an attorney. By 9 a.m. I'd already been awake for 3 hours, and I'd turned my kitchen table into a war room. Laptop open, father's will scanned, his handwritten note photographed, the escrow email printed and highlighted. I'd found Simone Garrett through a colleague at work who'd used her for a boundary dispute. Her assistant had squeezed me in for a morning consultation. Simone Garrett, a 48-year-old real estate attorney with 2 decades of title disputes under her belt, appeared on my screen at exactly 9 o'clock. Professional backdrop, no nonsense expression. Walk me through it, she said. I did. The email, the price, the buyer, the fact that I hadn't known I owned the property until last night. She listened without interrupting, taking notes I couldn't see. Send me everything, she said. The escrow email, any documentation you have. I shared my screen, pulled up the files. She was quiet while she read, and I watched her face for reactions that didn't come. Then she opened another window on her end. I'm pulling county records now. A pause. Clicking. More silence. County records are clear, she said finally. Title transferred to you September 2024, notarized and recorded. Your brother has no ownership stake. 0. Something in my chest loosened. So the transaction is invalid. Completely, she said. He can't sell what he doesn't own. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But there's something else here. The relief evaporated. She scrolled through something on her screen, her expression shifting slightly. Not alarm, exactly. Just focus sharpening. There's a lien on the property, she said. $47,000. Filed last April by Cornerstone Capital Services. I stared at her through the screen. A lien, yes. Your brother took out a loan using the house as collateral. He took a loan against a house he didn't own? Yes, she said. That's fraud. The word hung between us. I'd spent years teaching clients to recognize when family members weren't just making mistakes, they were making choices. Patterns, not accidents. This wasn't Desmond panicking after Dad died and making a bad decision. This was Desmond planning, executing, lying. April, 8 months ago. 2 months before Dad even died. Does the buyer know? I asked. Almost certainly not, Simone said. If he did, he wouldn't be proceeding. He's about to purchase property with an undisclosed encumbrance. That's actionable. So Desmond committed fraud against the lender when he took the loan, and he's committing fraud against the buyer by not disclosing it. Correct. I looked away from the screen for a second, processing. Beckett was standing in the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, watching me quietly. What happens now? I asked. I can contact the escrow company today, Simone said. Provide proof of legal ownership, notify them of the lien issue, and stop this transaction before closing. But I need your authorization to proceed. She waited, professional and patient. Behind me, Beckett stood in the doorway, equally silent. The next step wasn't complicated. It was just final. Yes, I said. Do it. Simone must have contacted the escrow company within the hour, because by afternoon the calls started. The first came at 2:47 p.m. while I was reviewing a case file at my desk, the second at 3:02, the third at 3:09. All from Desmond, all unanswered. At I was at work in my small office at the nonprofit in downtown Brooklyn. Through the window, I could see the parking lot, gray December sky pressing down. My phone sat on the desk between a stack of intake forms and a cold cup of coffee. I didn't call him back. Then, at 3:15, a text came through, not from Desmond, from Clifford, my cousin Clifford Dalton, 41, and perpetually caught between loyalty and cowardice. Texted with what looked like concern but felt rehearsed. Heard about the house. You should talk to Desmond. He's going through something. You understand. I stared at the message. You understand. I scrolled back through my text history with Clifford. We didn't talk often. Birthdays, maybe. Holidays, if he remembered. Then I found it 6 weeks ago, October 29th, the day after Dad's funeral. Hey, sorry for your loss. Do you know if your dad left anything specific in the will? Not. How are you holding up? Not. Let me know if you need anything. Just a direct question about inheritance, asked less than 24 hours after we'd buried our father. The concern wasn't new. It had been there from the funeral, waiting. I set my phone down and looked around my office. The walls were covered in posters, resources for the families we served, healthy boundaries, exit plans for toxic relationships. You don't owe anyone your safety. One poster behind my desk, the one I'd hung myself, read, document everything. Patterns don't lie. Advice I'd given 100 times to women trying to prove what everyone told them they'd imagined. Write it down, date it, save the texts, build the timeline. I'd never done it for myself. I opened my laptop, created a new document, timeline. Then I started typing. October 28, 2025, father dies. October 29, 2025, Clifford asks about inheritance via text. December 11, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Email from Hudson Valley Escrow Re, property transfer. Discover house in my name. Desmond listed as seller. Buyer, Wayne Sutton. December 12, 2025, 7 a.m. Find father's handwritten note explaining gambling debt, house transfer. December 12, 2025, 9 a.m. Consultation with Simone Garrett. Confirm transaction invalid. Discover lien. December 12, 2025, 2:47 p.m. First call from Desmond, unanswered. December 12, 2025, 3:02 p.m. Second call, unanswered. December 12, 2025, 3:09 p.m. Third call, unanswered. December 12, 2025, 3:15 p.m. Clifford attempts to pressure contact with Desmond via text. I read it over. Clean, factual, the kind of documentation that holds up. I didn't respond to Clifford's text. Instead, I saved the document, backed it up to the cloud, and set my phone face down on my desk. Then I went back to work, let them wait. They waited 2 days before Desmond came in person. He was waiting outside my apartment when I got home Thursday evening. 2 days of silence broken by his physical presence in my hallway. I saw him from the stairwell landing before he saw me. Desmond Frost, 39 and still trading on being the eldest son, had always treated family assets like his inheritance waiting to happen. He straightened when he heard my footsteps. "I just need to talk to you," he said. "Can you open the door?" I stopped at my door, keys in hand, didn't unlock it. "No," I said. "Say what you need to say." He exhaled the kind of sigh that said he was being patient with me. "Look, I know the lawyer called the escrow company. I know you're trying to stop the sale." "I'm not trying," I said. "I did stop it. That's what I need to talk to you about." His voice was conciliatory, reasonable. "I need that money to clear some debt, but you could still live there if you wanted. In the house. I wasn't trying to kick you out. Still live there." The presumption was breathtaking. "Yeah," he said, like it was generous. "I mean, obviously the new owner would need to agree, but Wayne's a good guy. I'm sure we could work something out. You could rent from him, maybe help with upkeep." This was the brother I'd grown up believing was smarter, more capable, more deserving, standing in my hallway asking permission to steal from me, and then offering to let me rent back what was already mine. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. Comment A if you think I should have opened the door and talked it out face to face, or B if keeping it closed was the right call, and tell me in one sentence why. Please note, what follows includes some recreated dialogue for narrative purposes, but the message is what matters. "Where's your share in the will, Desmond?" Long silence. Then his voice changed. Not louder, just colder. "You're going to regret this. Not a question, not a warning, a statement." "I heard you," I said. "Go home." I waited, key still in my hand, until I heard his footsteps retreat down the stairwell. The building door closed 3 floors below. Then I unlocked my apartment. Beckett was standing just inside, near the door. He'd been watching through the peephole. Didn't say anything, just stepped back to give me space. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, pulled up the timeline document, added a new line. Thursday, December 14th, 7:32 p.m. Desmond appeared unannounced at apartment. When asked about Will, responded, "You're going to regret this." Saved it. Backed it up. Beckett stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I closed the laptop. "I am now." The envelope arrived on Monday morning, 5 days after Desmond's visit. Cream-colored paper, expensive weight, the kind attorneys use when they want you to feel the gravity before reading. Return address: Hale and Associates, White Plains. I opened it in my kitchen, coffee in hand. Gregory Hale, the attorney whose letterhead promised aggressive advocacy for questionable causes, was representing Desmond in what he believed was a straightforward estate dispute. His letter was 3 paragraphs of legal language demanding I return certain items allegedly removed from the Rhinebeck property without authorization. The list was specific. Our father's wristwatch, a 1987 Seiko he'd worn every day. 3 photograph albums from the living room shelf. Access to the original will, which Hale claimed his client had never seen. I read it twice, the second time more slowly. Then I understood. Desmond wasn't fighting for the house anymore. He was trying to erase the evidence. The watch my father had handed me in the hospital with the folded note inside. The photos proving our family history, that the house had been our father's to give. The will he wanted to examine so he could claim it was forged or invalid. He'd moved past winning. Now he wanted to make sure I couldn't prove what happened. This was the midpoint, the moment I stopped reacting to what Desmond was doing and started understanding what my father had already done. He hadn't just transferred the house to protect it from gambling debts. He'd given me the watch, written that note in his own hand, made sure I had the evidence I'd need when this exact moment came. I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I'd kept the watch since that last hospital visit. The Seiko sat on its side, the leather band cracked from decades of wear, the face slightly yellowed but keeping perfect time. I picked it up, felt its weight. Inside then, in ink so faded I had to tilt it toward the light, my father had written a date, March 14, 2024, the day he'd transferred the house. Below it, in that same careful hand, for Thalia, this and the home are yours. Protect both. My father had known, not just about the gambling, not just about protecting the property. He'd known Desmond would try to erase what he'd done, would claim ignorance or fraud, or whatever story made him the victim instead of the person who'd gambled away his inheritance and tried to steal mine. So he'd made sure I had proof, physical, tangible, inscribed in his own handwriting inside a gift he'd given me in front of witnesses at Rhinebeck Valley Hospital. I set the watch down carefully, picked up my phone, and called Simone. She answered on the second ring. I got a letter from Desmond's attorney, I said, demanding the watch, photos, and access to the will. A pause. He's trying to erase the evidence. Yes, I said, but my father already made sure he couldn't. The escrow office was in a converted house on Rhinebeck's main street, white clapboard with green shutters, the kind of place where ordinary transactions happened every day. This one wasn't going to. Simone had answered my call about the demand letter with one instruction: let him send whatever he wants. On December 28th, we drove north, her briefcase containing every document that mattered. The conference room was small, fluorescent lights humming. Desmond sat on one side, next to Wayne Sutton, a 40-year-old business owner who trusted an old college friend and had no idea the house he was buying wasn't for sale. Wayne wore business casual, confident. Empty chairs faced them. First time in the same room since his visit, he didn't look at me. Jennifer Kemp, the escrow agent whose job was to facilitate smooth closings, introduced herself from the head of the table. Mid-50s, efficient, experienced. We're here to finalize the sale of 47 Orchard Lane, she said. Miss Frost, we'll need your signature as the legal owner. Desmond's jaw tightened. Wayne smiled politely. Before we proceed, Sim said, removing a folder from her briefcase, there are documents that need to be reviewed. Jennifer's expression shifted. The title search was completed last week. Yes, Simone said. Showing Thalia Frost as sole owner. Transfer dated September 14th, 2024 from Bernard Frost. Notarized and recorded. She slid the document across. Jennifer scanned it, nodded. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since that midnight email. Not revenge. Just the truth standing up for itself. Simone placed a second document down. Bernard Frost's will, notarized, confirming the transfer. Jennifer reviewed it. Wayne leaned forward, reading. His confidence was cracking. Then Simone placed the third document down. County records show a lien filed April 2025, she said. $47,000 against property my client owns. Filed by Desmond Frost, who has no ownership interest. Wayne's head snapped up. He stared at the document, then at Desmond. You didn't tell me about a lien. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that comes before anger. Desmond finally spoke. That's being disputed. It's also fraudulent, Simone said. You can't place a lien on property you don't own. The lender was never informed Mr. Frost had no legal claim. Jennifer read through all three documents, her efficiency replaced by alarm. She looked increasingly uncomfortable as the routine transaction dissolved into documented fraud. This transaction cannot proceed, she said. The seller has no legal authority to transfer title. There's an undisclosed encumbrance on the property, and based on these documents, there are questions of misrepresentation. Wayne pushed his chair back. I need to call my attorney. That would be advisable, Simone said. I didn't wait to hear what came next. Simone gathered her documents, and we walked to the door. Behind us, Wayne was already on his phone, the word attorney clear. Desmond hadn't said another word. I stepped into the hallway and kept walking. Simone's call came 3 days later, while Beckett and I were finishing dinner, her name lighting up my phone screen just after 7 p.m. Wayne Sutton filed this afternoon, she said without preamble. Misrepresentation, breach of contract, fraud. He's seeking the $15,000 deposit plus damages. I set my fork down. So he's suing Desmond. Yes. And he has a strong case. His attorney already contacted Gregory Hale. They're requesting full documentation of the transaction, proof Desmond had authority to sell, copies of all communications, which he can't provide. No, Simone said. He can't. I thought about that for a moment. 3 days ago, I'd walked out of the escrow office while Wayne called his lawyer, and Desmond sat silent. Now, the legal system was handling what I'd never needed to pursue. So I didn't have to do anything, I said. You protected your rights, Simone said. Wayne is protecting his. Those are separate matters, but they intersect at Desmond's fraud. Ironic justice. I hadn't sued my brother. I'd simply stopped him from stealing what our father had given me. But in trying to defraud me, he'd also defrauded someone else, someone who had the resources and motivation to pursue consequences I'd never needed to seek. Thank you for letting me know, I said. You're welcome. If Hale contacts you, forward it to me immediately. I promised I would and hung up. Beckett was watching me from across the table. What happened? Natural consequences, I said. He smiled slightly, then his expression shifted. Can I tell you something? I nodded. My brother, older, like yours, took out a loan years ago using my car as collateral, $11,000. He never asked permission, just forged the paperwork. I found out when the lender called me about missed payments. He paused, turning his water glass in slow circles. I never sued, he said. Paid off the loan myself because it was easier than fighting. But I always wished I'd set boundaries earlier. Before it got that far, I kept thinking maybe he'd change. We'd both learned the same lesson from different teachers. Family doesn't get to break you just because they're family. You don't regret not suing, I said quietly. You regret not stopping it earlier. He looked up, met my eyes. Yeah, that's exactly it. The phone rang. Desmond's name appeared on the screen, bright and insistent. We both watched it. The ring seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet apartment. Each pulse a demand. I had no obligation to answer. I didn't move. It rang again. Again. 4 times total, then silence as it went to voicemail. Beckett reached across the table and took my hand. Not tonight, I said. He squeezed once. Not tonight. Tomorrow I would send one email. 3 sentences, maybe 4. Clear boundaries, no negotiation, no explanation beyond what was necessary. Final. But tonight, sitting in my Brooklyn apartment with someone who understood that protecting yourself from family wasn't betrayal. It was survival. I didn't owe Desmond my time, my energy, or my immediate response. The phone stayed dark and silent on the table between us. Tomorrow would be soon enough. The morning was the first sunny one in 2 weeks. Light through the kitchen window, clean and sharp, and I sat down to write the email I'd been thinking about all night. Laptop open. New message to Desmond. Subject line 47 Orchard Lane. I typed 4 sentences. Sentence 1. I am the legal owner of 47 Orchard Lane per our father's will, executed and recorded September 2024. Sentence 2. I have no intention of selling or transferring the property in the foreseeable future. Sentence 3. Any future communication should go through our respective attorneys. Sentence 4. I don't want complete estrangement, but I need you to respect these boundaries. I read it twice. My cursor hovered over sentence 4. That last line, the softening, the explanation, the opening I didn't owe him. 34 years of making things easier for people who made things harder. The instinct to cushion the blow, to signal I wasn't really angry even when I had every right to be. I highlighted sentence 4 and deleted it. 3 sentences. Clear. Final. No apology, no invitation to negotiate, no reassurance. I didn't add Cliff to the CC line. He'd sent those messages, asked about the inheritance the day after the funeral, chosen his side. The absence was the message. For years, I'd believed that being kind meant making things easier for other people, even when it made things impossible for me. But kindness without boundaries wasn't kindness, it was self erasure. And I was done erasing myself to make room for people who saw my space as theirs to take. I clicked send. The email disappeared. No recall option, no second guessing. 3 sentences landing in Desmond's inbox, where he could read them or ignore them or forward them to his attorney. It didn't matter. I closed the laptop and walked to my bedroom. The drawer where I'd kept my father's things held his watch, the note, and one small brass key worn smooth. The tag read 47 Orchard in his careful letters. I'd kept it separate, stored away like it belonged to the past. But it wasn't just the past. It was mine now. Legally, practically, finally. I brought the key to the kitchen table and held it next to my apartment key, silver and brass, new and old. I slid the house key onto my key ring. The metal clicked as they settled together, 2 keys on one ring. My childhood home and my adult life no longer separated. Both mine, both real, both part of the same life. I held the keyring up to the morning light, both keys catching the sun. Beckett appeared in the doorway with his coffee. "You sent it?" he asked. I nodded. "And now it's done." "Almost," I said, looking at the brass key. "One more thing left." The house looked smaller than I remembered, white paint, weathered but solid. The apple tree bare except for the first hint of buds at the branch tips. We'd driven up the first Saturday of the new year, not as a visitor this time, as the owner. The key turned smoothly. Inside, everything was quiet. The living room with my father's reading chair. The hallway lined with family photos, me at 8, 16, college graduation. Desmond wasn't in most of them. I'd never noticed that before. I walked to the kitchen and stopped at the small table by the window where my father had read his newspaper every morning. His coffee mug in the dish rack. October's newspaper still folded on the counter. Beckett stood in the doorway, hands in pockets, giving me space. I touched the back of my father's chair, wood-worn smooth. "You okay?" Beckett asked quietly. I nodded. I was. I'd spent the last month defending this house, proving ownership, stopping fraud, setting boundaries. Every action about protection, holding the line against someone who wanted to take what wasn't his. But sitting here now, I realized that wasn't the whole story. Home wasn't the place you fought to deserve. It was the place you finally stopped fighting in. I pulled out my father's chair and sat down. Through the window, the apple tree stood in afternoon light, small buds visible on every branch, not blooming yet but preparing to. Spring coming even in January. My father's note had said, "You don't need to explain. You just need to keep it." I'd kept it. Not as victory over Desmond, but because my father wanted me to have a safe place. A home that couldn't be gambled away or stolen, something solid and real and mine. "I want to keep it," I said. Beckett nodded. "I know. Not because of Desmond," I said. "Because Dad wanted me to have this. I know that too." I looked around the kitchen, old cabinets, linoleum that needed replacing, the window that stuck. Small imperfections that made it real instead of perfect. "Maybe someday we could fix up one of the bedrooms," I said. "The one that gets morning light." He smiled. "Maybe. Not a plan, just a possibility. The house shifting from something to defend to something to build with. Future tense instead of past." I sat in my father's chair and looked out at the apple tree the way he must have thousands of mornings. Watching seasons change, buds appear, leaves fall, the cycle repeat. I'd spent weeks proving I had the right to keep this house. Sitting there, I realized I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I was just home. And that, finally, was enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent too many years believing that being kind meant never saying no to family. I thought boundaries were cruel. that standing up for myself made me selfish. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until someone tries to steal what's rightfully yours to finally learn that protecting yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. This revenge story isn't really about revenge. It's about justice. It's about realizing that sometimes the people who raised you aren't always who they should have been. Whether you're dealing with a family betrayal like mine or watching a grandma revenge story unfold in your own life, the lesson is the same. You don't owe anyone access to what's yours just because they're family. I believe God gives us these trials to show us who we really are when everything is stripped away. The house, the money, the legal battles, those were just the surface. What mattered was learning I deserve to take up space. If this revenge story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Please share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories about finding strength in difficult moments, subscribe to Your Story Matters Too. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. Please remember, some details in this story have been fictionalized for narrative and privacy purposes, but the core message, that you deserve to protect what's yours, is real and important.